Okay, starting over. So I forgot to record the first time. Chapter 3. More thrilling adventures. The captive princess and blanket tossing. They rested that night among some trees a short distance off the high road. The knight thought it was his duty to behave like the knights of the romances, who often laid awake thinking about their lady loves. But Sancho, after his hearty meal and all the wine he drank, fell asleep at once, and did not awake until his sleepless master roused him in full daylight. Don Quixote did not want breakfast. Sancho helped himself to food, of course, noticing with a sigh that the wine flask was becoming very light, meaning he had drank most of it. The two then struck out again on the public highway leading to Puerto La Peace. In the afternoon, they found themselves approaching a couple of monks from the Order of St. Benedict, with hoods over their faces and umbrellas in their hands, each of them mounted on a big, magnificent mule. A little behind them, but not in their party, came a coach containing a lady from Biscay and her maid, on their way to Seville to join the lady's husband, who was going to the Indies to take an important post. The coach was accompanied by 4 or 5 mounted men and 2 mule drivers. So you have like a carriage or a coach with an important lady in it and her niece, maybe? Daughter? Niece? Maid. And around the coach are several men posted there to help protect them from robbers or things like that. No sooner did Don Quixote see the travelers than he said to Sancho, "I am much mistaken if this is not going to be one of the most famous adventures ever known. These masked men in front are no doubt sorcerers who are carrying off the coach of some grand princess, and it is my clear duty to prevent them by all means in my power." So Don Quixote sees this group of travelers and thinks, oh, I bet those guys in hoods, they're actually monks, which means they work for the church, okay? I bet those are evil sorcerers. And they are carrying off this, they've captured this princess and they're carrying her off in the coach. It's my job to stop them. Oh boy. Why, said Sancho, this is worse than the windmills. Do you not see that the men in front are Benedictine friars, and that the coach is probably that of some gentleman? Mind what you are doing, sir, and do not let the devil deceive you. I have already remarked, friend Sancho, that you know nothing of the nature of knightly adventures. You will soon see that what I have told you is correct. With that, he planted himself in the middle of the road with a commanding attitude and called out to the monks, "Diabolical beings!" which means evil or like creatures from hell. "Diabolical beings! Release the princess you are carrying off in that coach, or prepare to die." The friars dropped their reins and stopped, amazed by the figure before them and its strange speech. Good sir, said one of them at last, we are not diabolical beings, but we're brothers of the Order of St. Benedict, who are journeying on the business of our monastery. As for the coach behind us, we knew nothing of it, nor can we tell if it contains a captive princess or not. No bandying soft words with me, you scoundrels, cried Don Quixote. I know well who you are. And without more ado, he charged the foremost monk, who, if he had not gracefully and promptly fallen off his mule, would have been knocked off in a very unpleasant fashion. The other monk thought it wise to use his heels on the sides of his beast and flew off over the plain as fast as the wind itself. So the other monk ran away like, this guy is insane. Don Quixote trotted on to meet the coach, and Sancho dismounted and began to strip the fallen monk. As he was doing this, 2 mule drivers and the monks came up and asked what he was doing. Sancho said he was gathering the spoils of battle won by his master. The men, who understood nothing of battle or spoils, and taking the matter seriously, fell upon Sancho instantly, pulling out his beard by the handfuls, and giving him such a kicking that he was left breathless on the ground. They then lifted the fallen monk on his mule and went off to join the monk who had fled, who was waiting at a safe distance. Once reunited, the friars hastened on their way, crossing themselves as if the devil were behind them. Okay, so what's happening is you're probably, so we're starting chapter 3, okay? You missed the last half of chapter 2, which is basically Don Quixote trying to attack many things and not getting very far. Okay, so well, let me just pause this. Crazy. So, meanwhile, Don Quixote had ceremoniously introduced himself to the lady of the coach and added, "Oh, your highness, you are now free to do as you please, for I have vanquished your wicked captors by the might of my arm. In payment of this service, all I ask of you is that you turn around and go to Toboso, and there report to my lady Dulcinea all that I have done for you." The lady's Biscayan attendants could not make out what the knight was saying, but gathered that they were now expected to journey out of their way to Toboso. One of them, impatient and hot-tempered, went up to the knight, and pushing aside his lance, said in broken Spanish, "Clear out of the way, sir, and let this coach and lady alone, or as sure as I am Basque, I will knock the life out of you." To this Don Quixote calmly replied, "If you were a gentleman, which you are not, I would punish you for your rashness, but I cannot bother with such a miserable creature as you." At this the Biscayan man flamed up and roared out that he was of good birth and ancient blood, and that he was a gentleman by land or sea, and everywhere, and at all times. He would prove it if Don Quixote would throw down his lance and take to his sword. So, now in this case, Don Quixote has insulted one of the servants that was guarding the coach of the woman, okay? And the guy says, "Fine, I challenge you to a sword fight." Now, the problem is, this guy is trained in sword fighting. Don Quixote, not so much. The knight accepted the challenge, drew his sword, and prepared to slay the Biscayan for his insolence. The valiant Biscayan drew his sword and took a cushion from the coach to be his shield. Still, he had the disadvantage of riding a slow, stupid mule or donkey, while Don Quixote was mounted on Rocinante, who was more manageable. They attacked each other with great ferocity, slashing and maneuvering, raising a great cloud of dust, but doing little harm, actually, to each other. At last, however, the Biscayan struck home a heavy blow on Don Quixote, which would have ended the knight's life, if it had not been somewhat deflected by his shield. As it was, the blow chopped away the left side of his helmet and half of his ear, and fell on his shoulder with such force that it almost knocked him out of his saddle. Quickly recovering himself, and now more furious than ever, Don Quixote readied himself for one tremendous blow that should end the battle. Grasping his sword with both hands, and calling loudly for Lady Dulcinea's protection, he raised his sword over the doomed Biscayan. Doomed because, at that critical moment, when his only chance of escape was to swerve, his mule refused to move. Okay, pause. Donkeys are known for being very stubborn. Okay? Even though you may direct them one way or another with the reins, they don't always follow you. Okay? So here comes the Biscayan, the guard, on his mule. Here comes Don Quixote on Rocinante. And as they're rushing, okay, Rocinante keeps going, but the mule stops all of a sudden. Just like stops in his tracks. And the Biscayan guy is like, hello? Let's go. Okay? And meanwhile, Don Quixote is charging. All this is happening at the same second. Down came the mighty sword of the knight on the head of the Biscayan, which was guarded only by the cushion, and in a moment he lay sprawling in the dust, bleeding from his nose, mouth, and ears. Don Quixote jumped down from his steed and, with his sword on the man's throat, called on him to surrender or die. But the unfortunate fellow did not have the power to speak, and would have suffered the consequences of silence, if the ladies in the coach, who had been watching in terror, had not come out and begged the knight to spare his life. Don Quixote graciously agreed to do so, on the condition that this man would go to Toboso and submit to the will of the Princess Dulcinea. The poor ladies gave their pledge, without understanding in the least what the whole business was about. But this was enough for Don Quixote, who rode away, followed by Sancho Panza. Yes.
How is sparing someone's life, which is already probably going to suffer the rest of his life, gracious?
Well, he certainly did. He gave him a chance, at least, to maybe get better.
Not really.
As they rode along, Sancho cautiously asked if the success of the battle could mean his appointment as governor of an island. It's like, hey, Don Quixote, so you won a battle. Does that mean I get my island now? Oh, that's the thing. Sancho Panza agreed to work for Don Quixote because Don Quixote promised to give him governorship of an island. So, like, become the governor or president of an island. Don Quixote explained that such trivial encounters on the road did not lead to governorship, or, indeed, anything better than broken heads and chopped off ears. Sancho must be patient until more serious adventures arose. Then there would be no shortage of governorships to choose from. Meanwhile, the knight's injured ear continued to bleed freely. Sancho proposed they stop to bandage it. Don Quixote expressed regret that he did not have some wonderful balsam of the great Fierabas, a single drop of which would cure the most serious wounds. Read this little blurb right here for me, please. Connor, nice and loud.
Marcel is a fragrant resin from a tree such as a fir used in medicines and perfumes. According to legend, Fireball was a giant who stole from wealth the liquid with which Jesus had been involved.
Involved. You're right.
Which was believed to have the power to miraculously heal him.
Good. So this was it was a legend that this balsam of Fierabas was this kind of like Lucy's cordial. It was this magical potion that could heal wounds. Okay, and Don Quixote had read about it in his books, and he's like, "Oh man, I wish I had some of that balsam with me right now." However, he knew the recipe by heart and would make it on the first opportunity he got.
Oh no.
Oh, listen. It is a balsam that heals wounds that are otherwise mortal, meaning they would kill you, he said. And therefore, when I have given it to your charge, all you will have to do when I am cut in two in some battle, as is often the case, is take the two pieces before the blood has a chance to congeal, place them very exactly next to one another, give me 2 drinks of the liquid, and you will see me instantly become as sound as an apple. He says, this balsam is great. What happens is this. Sancho, if I ever get cut into 2 pieces, if I get sliced in half, all you gotta do is put my 2 pieces next to each other and then give me some drink of that stuff, and boom, I'll be healed like that.
What about that? No. Yeah,
Sancho promised to keep this in mind. He was deeply impressed with the miraculous powers of this liquid, and suggested that he be given the recipe as payment on the promise of a governorship, for he knew he could make a fortune from it. But his master would not listen to such a greedy proposal. For the time being, Sancho treated the injured ear with lint and ointment he carried in his pouch. After a meal of bread and onions, as darkness came on, they made haste to find a place where they could lodge for the night. They came upon nothing but the huts of some goatherds, where they were kindly received and treated to a hot supper of goat meat. They passed the night in conversation with the goatherds, and were entertained by the long history of the cruel fate of one Chrysostom, a young shepherd who had died that morning, of a broken heart over the love of a girl who spurned him, meaning she did not love him back. He died of a broken heart. Yes.
Oh no,
Don Quixote is the one with the bleeding ear.
the other night's probably
The other, the Biscayan guard that was traveling with the woman in the coach, he is the one that was hit on the head by Don Quixote and was bleeding everywhere. He was unconscious on the ground. Ian?
I was just going to say, how do they know he died of a broken heart? How do they not know that someone bruised or something?
According to the story, he died of a broken heart. Well, doesn't take much for Don Quixote to believe that. Now, Don Quixote, who we know is a romanticist, right? He's obsessed with romantic chivalry novels. When he hears this story of a man who died of a broken heart because a woman didn't love him back and he loved her, he is just like so brokenhearted for this man, right? Oh, that is so sad. I totally understand. I'm so sorry. Don Quixote was so interested in this touching story that he went with the goatherds to the young man's funeral the next day. Didn't even know him. After the melancholy ceremony, the knight and his squire went on their way. The day promised to be uneventful and would have been, except for the frolics of Rocinante among a drove of horses as his master and Sancho napped in the shade of some trees. The drovers, who numbered about 20, beat off Rocinante with needless violence. Don Quixote, awakening and seeing how his steed or his horse was being treated, did not hesitate to seek revenge. The fight was short and sharp, as might be expected from the difference in numbers, and both the knight and squire were left badly bruised by the staffs of the drovers, who also gave poor Rocinante some blows. It was a long time before Don Quixote and his horse could travel, and then only in a slow and painful fashion. Late in the day they limped as far as a roadside inn, where their battered condition caused great excitement and sympathy in the compassionate landlady and her daughter, who plastered Don Quixote's bruises with medicine. Rickety beds in the attic were the best sleeping accommodation that could be provided. Don Quixote, however, fancied that he was in a castle. In the middle of the night, this is a good part. In the middle of the night, his injuries began to be painful again, and, remembering the balsam of Furabus, he called out to Sancho, "Rise, Sancho, if you can, and call upon the governor of this castle," quote-unquote castle, "to supply you oil, wine, salt, and rosemary to make the healing balsam. For in truth, I want it badly." Yes. What happened with the inn? Oh, with the horses? Oh, so all that happened here was Sancho and Don Quixote were napping in the trees one day, and when they woke up, they found that Rocinante, or Don Quixote's horse, was in a fight, or a bunch of other like drovers who were like kind of like cattle herders or shepherds on horses. They had been kind of picking at Rocinante and they were injuring him. So Don Quixote came over to be like, "Stop that! That's ridiculous!" But 20 people against one, they all got beaten up pretty bad.
And I'm guessing the squire was too busy eating.
Essentially. Does that make more sense? Okay, so now in the middle of the night at this inn where they had been they were allowed to stay for a little while, he wakes up in pain from all his injuries from being beat up. Okay, and he calls up to Sancho all the ingredients he needs to make his balsam of Furabus.
Oh no, squire.
Sancho, who was stiff and sore himself, blundered about in the dark, but at last found the landlord and got what he needed. He gave them to Don Quixote, who mixed portions together, put them in a pot over the fire, and boiled them down to what he judged to be the proper consistency. Having prayed and made many crosses over the pot, he filled a flask for future use, and then drank down about 1.5 pints of what was left. The result was immediate and startling. The stuff caused a most violent attack of retching. Retching is this. That's a retch. Which emptied the knight's stomach of everything it held in a brief time. Then Don Quixote began to sweat very heavily, so that he had to be covered up to stay warm, and finally he fell into a deep sleep. After 3 hours he woke up, hardly feeling any pain from his bruises. He was now firmly convinced that with such a remedy he could take any risk on the field of battle without danger from wounds, regardless of how serious they might be. Now, he woke up feeling better probably because he got some sleep, and he had thrown up everything in his stomach. Okay? But he is convinced that this Balsama Furibus works miracles. Okay? So he is like, this is the best stuff ever.
That was probably just pure luck that healed.
Maybe. Now, Sancho, seeing that Don Quixote felt a lot better from his balsam, he's like, I want to try that.
Oh no.
Sancho, seeing the good the balsam had done his master, begged to try it. Permission was granted, and he drank what was left in the pot, which was nearly as much as the knight had taken. But the medicine did not work in the same way. Perhaps because of his delicate stomach, it stayed inside of him, causing the most horrible cramps and bringing on a series of cold sweats, shiverings, and faintings, until he thought his fatal hour had come. But at last relief came, though in a violent and volcanic, meaning like a volcano, matter at both ends, north and south, and left him quite exhausted. North and south. Volcanic eruptions. Poor Sancho.
Wait, give it to the
Hey. Hey, hold on. Yeah, that balsam has some serious power. The knight, on the contrary, was ready to be off, and felt himself in prime condition for his chivalrous duties. He saddled Rocinante himself, took a pike he found in the yard to be his lance, vaulted into the saddle, and from that perch gave a flowery speech to about 20 or so people who had come out of the inn to watch him. The innkeeper stepped forward to remind him that he had not paid his bill. Now, you have to understand that in these stories that Don Quixote is used to, knight-errants and knights are never asked to pay for where they stay. They're just welcome to stay there because of the service they do for the people. Okay? Everyone considers them like a hero, and so no one makes them pay. So Don Quixote, when being asked to pay, he's a little insulted. He's like, whoa, 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 I'm a knight. I don't have to pay. What? Cried Don Quixote. Is this really an inn? I took it for a castle. But inn or castle, it is against my principles to pay anything. Who ever heard of a knight-errant being called upon to pay for his lodgings? The landlord protested that he knew nothing about such principles and only wanted what was owed to him. He's like, look, dude, you stayed for a night. I just want you to pay for your night. That's all. I don't know what you're talking about. Just pay me what I owe. What you owe me. But Don Quixote, calling him a fool and a miserable innkeeper, spurred Rocinante, brandished his pike, and scornfully rode away. No one tried to stop him. Notice who was left behind. Sancho. The innkeeper, seeing the master ride off, went indoors to find Sancho. But when Sancho heard where matters stood, he flatly refused to go against his master's principle, and swore he would not pay a penny. The other guests at the inn sympathized with the landlord, and some of the lively ones decided that he should get justice. Getting a stout blanket, they put Sancho in the blanket and carried him to the yard, where they tossed him high in the air amid shouts and roars of laughter. Don Quixote, hearing the uproar and then noticing that his squire was not with him, rode back to the inn. There he heard the protesting voice of his poor faithful squire and caught brief glimpses of his grotesque outlines as he rose in the air above the wall of the yard. In a great outrage, Don Quixote rode around the inn trying to find a way to rescue Sancho, but all the gates had been locked. The knight was reduced to making threats of revenge, but none of these had any effect on those in the yard. They did not stop laughing or tossing until they were finally tired out. Then they sat Sancho on his donkey and rushed him out a partly open gate, which they immediately closed again. Yes. Okay, so basically, let me kind of show you what happened to poor Sancho. Okay, let's see. Brian, come on up here. All right, take the other end of my jacket here. All right, now we're gonna stick this little red pen in here. Come closer to me. Closer. Hold him up. Okay, now we're gonna toss the pen up in the air. Ready, like this. Okay, so that's what they did, but with Sancho and not a pen. Okay, and then I don't know. Then all Don Quixote could see, there was a fence, right? So all he could see was Sancho every now and then, like okay. Poor Sancho.